My name is McDonagh. I'm a Columban missionary. I worked for many years in the Philippines. I became involved there in issues to do with the environment and the churches. The Philippine bishops were the first bishops in the world to actually give out a pastoral letter on the environment. So in recent years, the churches have become very interested in these areas of the environment, and particularly in climate change. And climate change is a major issue at the moment because we're preparing for the COP. That's the meeting of the parties, which will take place next week, the first and second week of November in Glasgow. So in our background, we see that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is a group of scientists around the world, they meet every year to talk about climate change and what countries must do to reduce their greenhouse gas effects. In other words, for burning coal, fossil fuel, gas and petrol. So the object of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is to give scientific information so that governments and others can use this to bring down greenhouse gases as quickly as possible. The most successful one was the one in 2015 in Paris, where the delegates agreed that we must not let climate change, we must not let the average global temperature go above 1 degree Celsius, 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial times. Because if we do, this will have enormous negative impact through extreme weather on the environment. But a lot more needs to be done. We basically need our carbon emissions need to go to zero by 2050. We need to lose about even half of them before 2030. So in actual fact, there's a real necessity to do this as quickly as possible. The most recent report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change came out in August of this year. It's called the 6th Assessment Report of the IPCC. It's the clearest, most comprehensive account of climate change and the science of climate change. It's the one we now know hugely that this is a real issue for humankind. And the United Nations Secretary General made the point at a time in August that it is a red code for humanity. Now is the time to do something about it seriously. Now, where do the churches come in? We have to play a role ourselves. In the 1980s, 1990s and the first decade of this century, the Catholic Church had very little to do with climate change. For example, many of the COPs, which I was present at myself, the climate change found very little participation from the Roman Catholic Church itself. So in actual fact, the first time that climate change was mentioned by Pope John Paul II was in a 1990 document called Peace with God the Creator, Peace with All Creation. And basically he mixed up climate change and the destruction of the ozone layer. So later in 2007 I was present at a conference in Rome where the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace had this conference. But they allowed two climate change people who don't believe in climate change, quite to talk at that conference. So it was extraordinary how little involved the Catholic Church was with this at the time. And even in 2009, Pope Benedict published his first encyclical, social encyclical, and Caritas et Veritate, and he didn't even mention climate change. Here's something that's one of the most serious problems now facing the planet, and it wasn't even mentioned in 2009. The big breakthrough came with a group of scientists from the Pontifical Academy of the Sciences who worked on a document called Fate of Mountain Glaciers in the Anthropocene. And they were the ones that gave the big breakthrough and made it very, very clear that humans are responsible for climate change, the way we're burning energy, and also here in Ireland with our so they made a plea to us to particularly get rid of carbon dioxide and methane as quickly as possible. Now, as I say, we've been very slow to do this. In the Compendium of the Social Teaching of the Church, was published less than 20 years ago, 2004. The book has about 350 pages, but there's only one paragraph on climate change and only one paragraph on the destruction of biodiversity. And they don't even include Pope John Paul's call for an ecological conversion, which is very central to how this will in the future. I've been involved with climate change, with the Conference of the Parties since 1992. I was in Rio when it was set up, and the one that was very much, the churches that were very much involved in climate change and the environment were the World Council of Churches, with the title they gave, Justice, Peace and the Integrity of Creation. World Convocation on Justice, Peace and Integrity of Creation, which took place in South Korea. And there again they brought together a lot of resources, so that this will be now seen as a central theological and ethical reality for all the churches. Two of the books booklets they brought out were Sign of Peril, Test of Faith, that was 1994, and the second one, Solidarity with the Victims of Climate Change, because this is the most important thing. This is an ecological issue, but the people who will suffer more are the poor. We in the West, the beginnings of our Western civilization, the mechanization, happened in Britain 2.5 years ago. So we need to be very grateful to the World Council of Churches. And Cardinal Roger Ichigai, who was the president of the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace, he wanted to thank the World Council of Churches for the work they have done in this area. Very much post 2015, this is central to our teaching because of the encyclical published by Pope Francis in 2015 called Laudato Si, a call to look after our planet. Laudato Si is now at the heart of Pope Francis' ministry. He makes it clear that this very central issue is a major issue for Catholicism right at this moment. So he's made it very clear that we must change our lifestyle, our methods of production, our methods of consumption, and the patterns which cause climate change at the moment. And we only have 30 years to do that, and we must do it immediately. The point is that many of the poor have very little resources. They haven't caused this. It's we in the West that have caused it by burning more and more fossil fuel, but they will be very affected by it. And so we have a responsibility to them in justice, as well as responsibility to our Creator to look after the earth at the moment. So recently, in 2019, Pope Francis has endorsed the 1.5 temperature rise above pre-industrial levels. It's very serious because the future generations will inherit an earth that's been greatly spoiled. That's the point the Pope is making, and our children and grandchildren will have to pay for the kind of work we have done with our environment. So, given the seriousness of the crisis, every parish should set up a climate change committee and work with other Christian churches and other religions to address that. For example, retrofitting houses. Could it happen in parishes? Could people learn how to do it locally? Could that bring down the costs? These are all things that need to happen in the next 10 or 15 years. Such a context of support at local and national level makes it very possible for people to implement radical changes in their lifestyle, which are now being demanded by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. The time to achieve this is very short, and we must start now.